Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it's your dope. It's your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett, Robcasting from this, the Robservatory. And this is, of course, Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 317. My God, has it been that many episodes already? I can't even believe that it's been as many as it's been since the 300th episode. Who would have thunk, ladies and gentlemen? Who would have thunk? Some people, because I guess you're all still here. And of course, it's very interesting now. Now that I'm in the Robservatory, and whenever I start talking, you know what happens. Everybody knows what you. I mean, you know them, you love them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Gilbert, the Gilberian from the planet Gilbar, is here. He wants his cookies. He gets his cookies. I like when you come in at the beginning. Okay, buddy, you got to get down now. Get down, good boy. Now your sister, get down. Now your sister, she has to get her cookies too. Come on. No, Gilly. Tallulah. No, you got two. Tallulah gets one. I mean, you know, it's part of the show, right? Okay, there you guys go. Wow, they were Johnny on the spot today, these two dogs. Well, they're all part of the show, ladies and gentlemen. For all of you new subscribers, Gilbert and Tallulah, the gruesome twosome, they're both doodles. Gilbert is a Bernedoodle. He's 25% Bernese Mountain Dog and 75% Poodle. And Tallulah is an Irish Doodle. She's 50% Irish Setter and 50% Doodle, which probably explains why she's insane. But anyway, wow, Academy Award nominations came out today. Pretty exciting. The trailer for Morbius dropped, which is also pretty exciting, and I quite loved it. So I don't know what you guys thought, but I did love the trailer for Morbius. I was very surprised. Really loved the tone. Really loved the way it just everything about that Morbius trailer really did it for me. So I can't wait. I've often talked about how one of the most unsung science fiction fantasy films of the last decade, actually I think it's 2009, so maybe over a decade ago, was a movie called Mr. Nobody that stars Jared Leto. If you haven't seen it, there's two versions. Get the longer version. It's quite extraordinary, and it's not that well known, surprisingly enough. I don't quite know why that is. So, ladies and gentlemen, today is kind of an interesting day, interesting topic to discuss. As many people know, many of you don't know, but I used to be what's called a story analyst, or better known as a reader, but we call them story analysts now. There's even a story analyst union. And what a reader does is basically every production company and studio and agency. I've worked as a reader. I worked at Silver Pictures for Joel Silver. I worked at both CAA and William Morris. At one point, I worked for both overlapping. As a freelance reader, I also worked for Pierre David's company. I was a development executive for director Robin Armstrong way back in the day. He directed a movie called Pastime, and he was the first director of Free Willy before he left the project and Simon Windsor took over. I stayed on the project but then went to work for him. So I had, in the 90s, a long experience with story development. And basically what a reader does is the most basic entry-level job. You read screenplays, and you basically write a book report about them. You synopsize what the screenplay is about, then you write whether you recommend them or not, and you're not supposed to really say recommend. And I've famously said to people, I read thousands of scripts professionally, and I said yes to one. You don't usually say yes. It's either, well, it's you recommend, but I actually said yes to one famously, and I've told this story a million times, but I will spare you. But the one script that I said yes to in my entire career as a reader was Andrew Kevin Walker's script for Seven, and that was when I was working at Silver Pictures, and he was a clerk at Tower Records at the time. And he's gone on to a very storied career writing movies like 8mm and Sleepy Hollow. But Seven was his big breakthrough role, and I was at Silver Pictures at the time. So I've read a lot of screenplays. I also read a lot of screenplays for pleasure. When I first moved to LA and started going to USC, the first thing I discovered, because I didn't go through orientation, I'd never been to campus before the first day I went to start going to school. But at USC, they have their stately Doheny Library. And in the Doheny Library, when I went there was a huge collection of screenplays that you could check out and read. And the first day I was there, just out of curiosity, I wanted to see if they had David Cronenberg's draft of Total Recall. Now, this was in 1988, so it was before Paul Verhoeven had made Total Recall. I think Total Recall came out in 1990. So I read Cronenberg's draft of Total Recall, which is very interesting, very different kind of a take on it. And then, of course, the Cinema Library had all kinds of screenplays. So for fun, I would check out lots of scripts that were in various stages of production. They had a lot of scripts that hadn't either been made yet or were in the process of being made. I remember my roommate John Parcan brought home scripts for like Hunt for Red October when they were in production. So I've always been interested in screenplays. And, one of the first things I did when I lived in Los Angeles, when I moved to LA, was I wanted to get my hands on this screenplay for Jacob's Ladder that Bruce Joel Rubin wrote, who wrote Brainstorm and Ghost, because it was the AFI touted it as one of the top 10 unproduced scripts in Hollywood that were great, the greatest unproduced scripts in Hollywood. So I've always read screenplays because they're the very basis of all film. You can't make a great movie without you having a great or at least very competent screenplay. And I've often found myself going back and finding like projects I covered even back in the early 90s. Speed Racer, for instance. I must have read 4 or 5 different drafts from different writers. Green Lantern, a writer named Alex Zamm wrote a draft of Green Lantern. So movies, Logan's Run, how many drafts for the remake of Logan's Run have I read? And I even have Richard Maibaum, James Bond writer Richard Maibaum's 1967 draft of Logan's Run. So I've always read different iterations of things, and one of the benefits of living in Hollywood is you can pretty much get your hands on anything, especially if something isn't made. If a script doesn't get made or a various draft of a script doesn't get made, nobody cares. It sort of falls out of interest. Nobody's really interested in things that don't get made. Nobody pays attention to them because who cares? Why care? I mean, I love seeing various iterations of projects. Sometimes projects turn out much better than they could have. Like, for instance, I covered when I was at Silver Pictures, Face Off, which later became John Woo's Face Off, which is a very different movie than the original script that I had covered. And it's always interesting to see the long, torturous journey some movies take to the big screen. Now, obviously, when there's a movie, say a Star Wars movie, I actually have a 4th draft of The Empire Strikes Back that I got back in 1980. It's a very different draft than what made it to the screen. I mean, not much different, but a different draft. And I think with movies like franchise properties like Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark, you find things out like famously Harrison Ford was suffering from a wee bout of dysentery when he was shooting Raiders. And as scripted and in the novelization of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the swordsman comes with a big scimitar and they have a battle, and then, of course, when on the day Harrison Ford was ill, so he just said, "Can I just shoot him?" And he famously shoots the swordsman dead. Now, that wasn't originally in the script. So it's always interesting. I've always been a fan of novelizations, and so you get a chance to see what could have been. What could have been, ladies and gentlemen. And I think the biggest news over the last 5 years has been the Star Wars sequels. And as everyone knows, they have taken sort of a strange route to the big screen. Obviously, J.J. Abrams teamed up with Lawrence Kasdan and wrote together. They wrote the script for The Force Awakens. Lawrence Kasdan wrote Empire, came in after Lee Brackett, and really he wrote Empire, and then he wrote Jedi. He also wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then, of course, he became a director in his own right and directed Body Heat and Silverado and The Accidental Tourist, The Big Chill. So it's always very interesting to see how people come together and collaborate. Well, as everybody knows, when the Star Wars sequel trilogy was announced, it was going to be J.J. Abrams directing the first one, Obviously, Rian Johnson directing the second one. And Colin Trevorrow was going to direct episode 9. And at the time these were announced, we didn't know what they were going to be called and what was going to happen. And Colin Trevorrow was announced as the director of episode 9 in 2015 at D23. Here is an article. Jurassic World helmer Colin Trevorrow has been confirmed as the director of Star Wars Episode 9. It was announced at the D23 Expo in Anaheim. This was in August of 2015. So, of course, we had Force Awakens, obviously, coming down the pike. But this was very, very exciting. Colin Trevorrow added, "This is not a job or an assignment. It's a seat at the campfire, surrounded by an extraordinary group of storytellers, filmmakers, artists, and craftspeople. We've been charged with telling new stories for a younger generation because they deserve what we all had, a mythology to call their own. We will do this by channeling something George Lucas instilled in all of us, boundless creativity, pure invention, and hope." Now, I would like to just point out here, I don't know Colin Trevorrow. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. But I admire him because he made a film called Safety Not Guaranteed that captured the gaze of Steven Spielberg, who championed him. He became the kind of story that we all want. When we were in film school, we were always inspired by people like Colin Trevorrow and what happened to him. Back when I was in film school, there were people like John Singleton or Phil Joannou or people like that, James Gray. But when I was there, the story of Phil Joannou was a good one. And, of course, Boys in the Hood and what happened with John Singleton. It's always great when you hear about a young indie filmmaker who, based on great work, breaks through to the big time. And, of course, Colin Trevorrow ended up directing Jurassic World and making $1.5 billion. So I would say that's a pretty epic win for anybody who wants to make movies. And then, of course, being tasked with writing and directing Star Wars Episode 9. Oh my God. It's amazing. Can you believe that happens? It's just incredible. So his meteoric rise was inspiring, I think, to anybody who wanted to make films. Certainly me, an aging man-child with one foot in his grave. It's still inspiring to me, and it was great. Although, it wasn't meant to be, as we all know. And it was announced on December 5th, 2017 in the Hollywood Reporter. Colin Trevorrow is out as the Star Wars Episode 9 director. That was shocking, and I think, of course, unfortunate. And here is the actual statement. And people talked about Trevorrow's departure being rumored because his movie, The Book of Henry, came out, and it didn't do well with critics, and it was panned at the box office, which is always unfortunate. Sources tell the Hollywood Reporter that script issues have continued to be a sore spot throughout Episode 9's development, with Trevorrow having repeated stabs at multiple drafts. In August, Jack Thorne, the British scribe who wrote the upcoming Julia Roberts, Jacob Tremblay movie Wonder, was tapped to work on the script. Sources say that the working relationship between Trevorrow and Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy became unmanageable. Kennedy, who had already been through one director firing replacement on the Han Solo spin-off movie, was not eager for a sequel and tried to avoid this decision. Colin Trevorrow said this: "I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to affect the way that fans get to see these films," Trevorrow told Empire magazine. "When we were kids, these movies came to us from far away. They were a gift. And the more we talk about how they're made, the more it reveals that they're just movies. But they're not just movies. They're more than that. Beyond that, I got the opportunity to tell a story that is a celebration of everything I believe in. I got to tell it to George Lucas, and I got to tell it to Luke Skywalker. And those are experiences I will cherish for the rest of my life." Well, you know, you read something like that, and I'm always curious, having somebody I've worked in the industry in various capacities for 30 years. And I'm always curious about the development and what happens with properties and where things are going to go and how they develop. And I was curious. a lot of talk was made, of course. Colin Trevorrow and his writing partner, Derek Connolly, get story credit on episode 9. Now, here's the thing. For those of you who don't know, if there is a script written for a film, and the writers are either replaced or completely, or other writers come in to write new drafts, there's what's called an arbitration. The Writers Guild does an arbitration where the scripts are submitted. If you're members of the Writers Guild, this is basically an automatic process. It happens on every movie where multiple writers are involved that are WGA members. And so what happens is they're basically studied and examined, and a judgment is made, and the Writers Guild issues this person should get story credit, or sometimes they don't. I have friends who, for instance, have written various drafts of movies, and then they go through much development, tortured development. You might have 5 or 6 groups of writers that come through and write different drafts, and then at the end, everything has to be looked at by the Writers Guild. And sometimes, obviously, if writers work on a script and it doesn't get made, they could have worked for a year. It's a terrible thing, but it's never great. But a lot of work, it happens in the industry all the time. Studios are risk averse, so even in my own experience, I've had this happen in the past. So it's part of the sort of the ecosystem of the industry. It is not unusual, but it's always unusual to go back and then see what are the origins of these scripts. Now, again, I want to say that I've always admired Kathleen Kennedy, a woman who received her first producing credit on E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and I know that there's a lot of fans. She's been on the receiving end of a lot of ire, I think wrongfully so. I think she's one of the most accomplished producers and filmmakers in the history of Hollywood. Certainly, if not the greatest female producer in the history of Hollywood, she's right up there. And she's worked with the best of the best. She's worked with everybody from, obviously, Steven Spielberg, but Robert Zemeckis, David Fincher. I mean, she's worked with so many incredible filmmakers. She was handpicked by George Lucas to run Lucasfilm in 2012. So I have great admiration for her. She's obviously married to Frank Marshall. Well, that said, I couldn't help but be curious. How far along was Colin Trevorrow with his draft of Episode 9? Was there a draft of Episode 9? Did he finish a script with Derek Connolly, his writing partner? I was very curious. It was something that, well, we know he got story credit, so maybe he wrote an outline. What did he do? I don't know. Well, one of the things in the entertainment business, living in Los Angeles, I talked about this yesterday, about the access media. You don't just have access here. You're living in LA. The industry is still based here, even though a lot of people shoot in Atlanta and New York and Louisiana and Canada, Vancouver, Hollywood North, all of those things. But really, the industry, all the agencies are here. The studios are still mostly based here. So there's a lot of business that's done here. And one of the things that you realize when you've worked in the business for a long time is that everything is gettable. Maybe not when it's in production. But once something's produced, nobody cares. They really don't, and even the people in Hollywood are like, why are you interested in that? But it's always interesting, especially if you're a fan of something, to go back and to read it. So I was curious. I was always curious. I mean, what was Colin Trevorrow's contribution to Episode 9? And now, of course, there's going to be all kinds of think pieces. I think I've spilled a lot of bits on YouTube talking about Episode 9. Certainly a lot of other people have, as we all know. But, amazingly, first of all, I want to say right off the bat, don't even ask me if the information that I'm providing, if you can have anything. Because the answer to that is no. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to confirm or deny that take all of this if you want. It's not necessarily rumor or speculation, because it's not. But everyone's asking me about this already. I've had a deluge of any information I might have regarding this is mine and mine alone. I'm sharing it with you now. This is how I'm going to share it with you. Don't expect you can write me and I'm going to give you a file or something. It'll never happen. And don't even ask. And as far as I'm concerned, It's kind of like, let's just say I was in possession of anything. It was Mission Impossible. It was something that I might have been able to look at myself, and I will confirm I did look at something myself. I'm not saying what it is or where I even saw it or how I saw it. It no longer exists. It no longer exists in any form. So, no, I can't, in fact, share it with anyone. I just want to be clear on that before I continue. Colin Trevorrow did, with his writing partner, Mr. Derek Connolly, did in fact finish a draft, multiple drafts, I'm told. I've only looked at a draft, or maybe I looked at something else. Who knows? I could have actually looked at, maybe somebody brought me stone tablets off the mountains behind Pasadena, but I did look at something. I will confirm that. And I will show you at least, there's this, Star Wars Episode 9, and it's called Duel of the Fates. And here's the crawl. Yes, that was the crawl on a draft of Duel of the Fates. Star Wars Episode 9, Duel of the Fates. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that just made me all giddy, ghibli. I think Star Wars Episode 9, Duel of the Fates, would have been a title that would have set the Star Wars fandom ablaze, and everybody would have definitely got behind it. And certainly, I don't think that there would have been a lot of complaints. I mean, as far as wrapping up, I can't. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can imagine a better title than that. I really, honestly can't. And Duel of the Fates it is. Now, what's really interesting, how it mentions that communications in the galaxy have been choked off. The First Order is everywhere. They've occupied planets. I will tell you how this script opens. The first 15 pages of this script open like one of my favorite genre of movies, a men, or in this case, men and droids and women, oh my, men on a mission movies. I love men on a mission movies. I love James Bond movies that drop you right into the action. This script opens with people on a mission, droids on a mission. And where does it start? Something that Star Wars fans would have loved. At the Kuat shipyards is where it opens. What a cool place. There are Star Destroyers being constructed. The First Order is building their war machine. And the Kuat shipyards is something that has always been in Star Wars mythology, where a lot of these ships are built. And I thought that was kind of cool. And immediately on this mission, we begin with BB-8 and Rose Tico. Yes, that's right. BB-8 and Rose Tico open this script and open this story. And Rose and BB-8 are... By the way, can I just say that I hope that Kelly Marie Tran never, ever reads this script ever. Because Rose Tico is front and center throughout this whole movie, and her character is great as written. So Rose has been on a Kuat moon, and BB-8 is infiltrating. He's been painted different colors, and he's infiltrating the First Order. Well, where they're building these ships, and it's a lot of industry happening. There's an orbital ring, and then there's the moon below. And there are the beleaguered workers who aren't being treated very well by the First Order. And we jump right into it. And the plan is, let's see, Finn and Poe are also, they're at a different section. Everybody's working together. R2 and 3PO are not with them. And eventually Rey shows up. And the plan is, what they're going to do is they're going to send up, the ships are fueling from. There's basically an elevator that goes up from the moon to the ships, and there is a plan where they're going to send up. They're basically going to gum up the works and explode in this conduit, blow everything to hell. And of course, unfortunately, it doesn't work. They're thwarted. And there is a First Order, there's stormtroopers, and there's all kinds of people. And as Rose says, the power shaft delivers raw ore up to the orbital ring. And what they're going to do is that shaft, they're going to explode a detonated device in there to blow that all up, and it's all going to explode. And they think this is a great plan and that it's all going to work. It's going to take the whole thing down along with their new fleet. They're going to blow up the Quat shipyards. That's what they're going to do. And what's really interesting is the dialogue between all the characters here it's incredible. And I thought it was hilarious. It's very Star Wars, and it's very men on a mission, and everybody has their place, and it's very, very, very funny, and it's classic Star Wars. And even Post says, "Okay, let's blow this thing and go home." There's a little bit of fan service in there, but it works. It works really, really well, and you get a sense of where the galaxy is and how things are how the First Order is treating people, and this becomes very important later on in the script. Long story short, the First Order is on to them. They try when they detonate their devices. It doesn't work. The First Order is able to contain the blast, and the First Order comments on, "Come on, man, their tactics are so old. They didn't think we saw this coming." Well, they did see this coming, and everything goes foobar. There's an Admiral Vaughn from the First Order says their outdated tactics are pitiful. And, of course, it doesn't work, but as rebels are wont to do, like trying to rescue Princess Leia when you land on the Death Star and you find out she's there, they change their plans. And working together in a great bit, a great Star Wars, a classic Star Wars thing, you see suddenly Rey is revealed to herself. She's been dressed as a Tusken Raider. She is revealed that she has used the Smash lightsaber and her staff and created her own weapon, a double-bladed staff lightsaber hybrid that is unique to her that she has made, which is badass. And they talk about, and she's recognized by children as a Jedi, and it's great. And there's a big battle. And what happens is this. Poe and Finn and Rose and BB-8 and Rey steal a Star Destroyer. That's right. They steal a new dreadnought, an Eclipse-class Star Destroyer, and the end of the whole sequence is they take off with it. And this whole sequence is very reminiscent of the rescue of Han Solo from Return of the Jedi. And it's a fantastic sequence, and it comprises the first 15 pages of the script, and it's just you can't imagine something that's more Star Wars than this. And it doesn't rely on MacGuffins or anything weird. It's all owned. It all works. And then, of course, then we meet immediately. We see a ship called the Knife 9 that has the Knights of Ren in it. And the Knights of Ren are there, and they demand answers. They're not happy about this. And you get to see, you sort of meet the Knights of Ren here. The Knights of Ren meet Admiral Vaughn, and then Hataska Ren of the Knights of Ren kills Admiral Vaughn and is pissed. So then we cut to, get this, Coruscant. One of the big settings of this script is, of course, Coruscant, and that becomes a huge, huge deal. And we see that Coruscant is no longer the vibrant city or the city planet that we knew from the prequels. Coruscant is the new structure is built atop the Deco architecture of the Old Republic, growing older as we descend into the decrepit streets below, sedimentary layers of progress. And Coruscant is a occupied planet. The First Order has built their own citadel, their own palace there, and the people, especially the people at street level, Everyone has become scavengers. Everybody is looking around for their next scrap. It is an entire population that is under the jackbooted horror of the First Order. And nothing is good going on there. And Hux has appointed himself Chancellor Hux. And he's fond of addressing his people. And in this opening scene, they find you see Hux addressing everybody, and they found a traitor who helped them steal that Star Destroyer, and his name is Biss Kova. And Biss Kova is executed with a light blade guillotine. So we really get a sense that the First Order is, of course, they've taken over. The galaxy's under there. It's all bad. And their Commander Hux has a Commander Selleck that works with him. And, of course, they are in league, you find out, with a bunch of different alien warlords. And there's a sequence that's very similar to the scene on the Death Star when the Imperial generals were talking. Until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. It's a scene like that. And these warlords are in league with the First Order, so we get a sense that the First Order has allies. It's not just them. They've got a group. There's lords, and there's various... One of the aliens is mentioned as being a Weequay, which I thought was pretty cool. And they want to know about... They know that Rey is out there. They know the Last Jedi is out there. And what they really want to know is, where the hell is Kylo Ren? Kylo Ren has been... he's gone. No one can find him. And all Hux knows is that Kylo Ren has gone in search of something. In search of great power. He is, of course, the Supreme Chancellor. And we cut from this meeting with all of these warlords to Mustafar. And yes, we see Kylo Ren. He has made it to Mustafar. But Kylo Ren he's alone. And he does have a droid with him, a la Darth Maul. And he's got stubble. He's clearly been searching for quite some time. This has been going on for a long time. He goes to Mustafar, and we discover, shockingly, and I loved this, Kylo Ren is being haunted by Luke's Force Ghost. Luke is with Kylo Ren. And Luke is saying things like, this is where the dark path leads, an empty tomb. And Kylo is arguing with Luke. Kylo says, and where did your path lead? You're a ghost. And Luke says, I know what you're searching for, Ben. Your master promised you strength, but you feel hollow. There is a back and forth, and I just think it was awesome that Kylo Ren is being haunted by Force Ghost Luke. So we're now on page 20, and Kylo Ren is there, and Luke is trying to convince him to go home to Leia, and Kylo says, I'm going to be more powerful than any Jedi, even you. And in Mustafar, in the Vader's temple, there is the Sith holocron. And the Sith holocron is activated, and it turns on, and then a hologram of Emperor Palpatine is seen. So yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Palpatine was in the original version of Colin Trevorrow's idea, but only as a hologram, being projected out of the Sith hologram, or the Sith holocron, and you see Palpatine, and the holocron, this recording is for Vader. So Palpatine is addressing Vader, Lord Vader, young Skywalker will soon be ours, I've foreseen it, but we must prepare for the unseen should he strike me down. You will take him to the Remnicor system. There you will find Tor Valum, master of the Sith, who instructed me. Tor Valum, spelled T-O-R, second word V-A-L-U-M. So the Emperor is telling Vader that he needs to take, in case something happens to the Emperor, Luke is to be taken to see Tor Valum, the person who instructed Palpatine. And what happens here is the holocron then realizes, it scans Kylo Ren and realizes Kylo Ren is not Vader. And then it starts to short out, and a burst of red lightning blasts out of the holocron and fries Kylo Ren. And he's horrible, as it is said, the invasive pulse of energy spreads over Kylo's face like a cancer. Horrible, raw, purple veins streak through his skin. He screams in deep, unbearable agony. And at this time, we cut to the resistance base on Korolev. And that's when Princess Leia is introduced, and she feels what's happening to Ben. And on the base on Korolev, Chewbacca is there with her, and Lieutenant Connix is there. She's has a scar from battle, and they tell Princess Leia that the mission has come back from the Kuat shipyards, and they are shocked to see the Eclipse Star Destroyer, which they actually land on the planet, and the giant Star Destroyer. And of course, what's very funny is there is a moment here where Rey there are still First Order officers that were on the bridge of this ship, and of course, they've had their minds. Rey can do the Jedi mind trick on them, and they have to get rid of them. But Leia doesn't kill them. She has them escorted off, and Leia and Poe have a very funny exchange with Rose, and how Rose and Poe stole this Star Destroyer, and it's very funny. It's a very funny thing. And then there's a great moment, great scenes with Finn and Rey talking about how Rey believes that she's failed, and Rey is having a crisis of conscience. She doesn't think, after seeing people on the Kuat moon that recognize her as a Jedi, she doesn't think that she's going to be able to be what everybody wants her to be. She just doesn't think she's strong enough. And Finn talks about, are you still sensing Kylo Ren? And Rey admits to Finn that she has nightmares every single night. She says, every night I wake up screaming, every night another bad dream. And Finn asks, is it him? And Rey says, there's something between us and I can't explain it. Finn says you have to shut him out. And that Finn says he can't change. It's too late. And Rey says it's never too late to change. You taught me that, Finn. And it's a really great sequence, and it just solidifies their relationship, and it's very interesting. And then they realize that the Star Destroyer that they've stolen is full of Imperial weaponry. TIE fighters, walkers, urban assault vehicles, incredible amounts of heavy artillery, but they realize all they need now is an army big enough to make it all work, which is a lot of fun. And I don't know, let's see if anybody has any questions about this so far as I move forward. Anyway, I'd like to say my opinion of this. It's fantastic. I mean, it's Star Wars through and through. The idea that Luke's Force ghost was haunting Kylo Ren, amazing. That's I loved all of that interplay. It's all character interplay. The fact that Rey doesn't think she's strong enough, she's full of self-doubt. Really enjoyed that. I thought it was really terrific, and I really thought that was a really interesting, really great way to go. Let's see what people are here. There's a lot of people here. Let me just get through this. World's Greatest Detective sent in a super chat and said, Rob, I love your show. You're teaching me so much about filmmaking. What's your favorite Hitchcock movie? Mine is The Man Who Knew Too Much and Notorious. Well, it's funny. Somebody asked me this question the other day. My favorite Hitchcock movie is Rear Window, probably followed by Vertigo. And then, of course, maybe North by Northwest or To Catch a Thief, something like that. Those are my favorite Hitchcock films. So, yeah, there you go. Jay Canada says, hey, Rob, I would like to hear your thoughts on well-crafted foreshadowing. When it's not so well-crafted, the difference between it and less desirable effect of telegraphing when perhaps telegraphing works for you in a movie. Stay frosty. Well, I think well-crafted foreshadowing is it's what every great screenwriter does. It's the best storytelling is all about foreshadowing and not telegraphing, because if you're telegraphing, then the audience is ahead of you. And what you want as a storyteller is you want the audience to be with you, to be following along with you, but not quite knowing where you're going. And that way, if you're a deft storyteller, at some point you're gonna zig, and the audience is gonna have expected you to zag, and then they're caught off guard, and that surprises them. And it's those moments that make stories great. I would say one of the greatest moments that I had over the last, well, I was thinking about the last 2 decades, but I remember watching The Matrix for the first time, because I went into The Matrix, I didn't know anything about it. I knew that the Wachowskis had made it, but it wasn't on anybody's radar. And the red pill and the blue pill moment, when Morpheus offers Neo a choice, and Neo takes the pill, and he wakes up, and he finds out he's a human battery. And I remember sitting in the theater. I mean, I've seen so many movies, and I expected so many things out of this. That was certainly not what I expected. I thought I was way ahead of the movie. I expected it to be another Johnny Mnemonic. And that moment was one of the great moments. I mean, even in that scene, they're telling you what's happening. You can take the red pill or the blue pill, and yet you have no idea up to that point in the movie. You couldn't possibly have imagined, after what had been told to you, what the reality of the situation is. And it's amazing. And that, to me, is just one incredible piece of screenwriting that I did not see coming. And it was what a great way to be. I mean, that's why I go to the movies. Lore sent a $10 tip in. Greetings, Rob. We met in Tel Aviv 15 years ago following the screening of your film Free Enterprise. There was a small group of us chatting with you at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque coffee shop. I was so impressed by your passion and knowledge back then, and I still am. Well, Lore, first of all, what Lore is talking about, back in 2005, I went with Roger Nygard, who directed Trekkies and Trekkies 2, to Tel Aviv. There was a festival there, the Icons Festival, and both of us were brought over by the festival. And he brought his movie Trekkies, I brought Free Enterprise, and we lectured. And it was, first of all, Tel Aviv is one of the world's great cities. It's so much fun there. The people are great. It's incredibly cosmopolitan. I really loved my time there, and I was surprised at just how many people spoke English. The Tel Aviv Cinematheque was a great venue, and it was very funny too. One day when I was there, I was only there for a few days, but somebody came up to me and said, "So what are you talking about?" And I said, "What do you mean? Your speech. You're giving a speech. It's already sold out." I was like, "What?" And I guess they forgot to tell me that I was delivering like a TED talk about movie making in Israel. But it went really well. I mean, I told so many stories about making Free Enterprise, so it went great. But it was a great event. I loved all the people that I met. And yes, I was able to go see Jerusalem, and they took very, very good care of me. It was an amazing experience. So, Lore, I have not forgotten being in Israel. I was even on Israeli TV. And it was funny, everybody in Israel was worried about what I thought about piracy. And obviously piracy affects especially low-budget filmmakers if you're making genre movies and things like that. But a lot of people in Israel were worried because so much stuff is not released legally in Israel. And I said, look, if nothing is, if you can't get something, if it's not commercially available in your country, I would say if you want to see something, you should see it. I mean, I think it's more important that, even though I can't believe I'm saying this, because the bread and butter of our industry, piracy has become a huge, huge, huge problem. But also, it's taken a while, I think, for the way business works and the way movies are sold territory by territory. A lot of the time, smaller countries like Israel would not get, you wouldn't have a domestic distributor pick up a lot of things, or it wasn't being aired in Israel right away. They might have to wait for it. It's problematic. So on one hand, I would say I don't condone piracy at all, but if they're not going to make it commercially available, what are you supposed to do? Not get it? I mean, I've certainly bought things from all over the world, from Amazon all over the place. If I want something from Amazon Japan or Amazon France or Amazon Germany or Amazon France, I'm always scouring the different Amazons around the world, buying things that aren't released here domestically. That's what's happened to 3D. If you want to get any 3D discs, they're not sold here anymore. I think Alita was the last, maybe it was the last domestic 3D disc that came out. Spider-Man Far From Home, you got to go get that from England. That benefits somebody somewhere, but I loved Israel. So, Laura, thank you for sending that in. Willow sends in a tip. She says, Willow says, I totally believe that you have $32 million. How else can you afford all these hot toys? For anybody who wants to know what she's referring to, somewhere Google said that John Campea was worth like $50 million and I was worth $32 million. And I joked, I'm worth about 32 cents. I might have $32 in my savings account, to be honest. I mean, I'm an independent filmmaker. I'm always scrimping and saving and borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I certainly do not have $32 million. And if I had $32 million, I would be coming at you from a film set because I would probably be investing my own money and making something. I don't know who figures that out. I really wish that the credit agencies thought I had $32 million and they might extend me what credit I might need based on that income level. Unfortunately, I like I said, I've got about $32 in my bank account in savings. So there you go. Jason S. sent in a tip and said, hello, Anti-Rob from the Mirror Universe. The other day I was in a big box retailer late at night and for the first time saw a large self-driven machine going around the store mopping and sweeping. It felt surreal, like I was in a futuristic sci-fi movie. Well, Jason, we got to get used to that because we're going to be seeing a lot more of it. Automation is here. And yes, indeed, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. Darren from the UK sent in a super chat saying, we need a 4K Blu-ray of Seven with the silver retention. For those of you who might not know, silver retention, or there's processes in post-production on films, and that was one of them. And if you had the Criterion Laserdisc of Seven, there was a piece on silver retention and how they made the film look the way it did. And I agree, Cardinal Sin. It would be nice to have seen that. I think that was that'd be a good thing to do. Jeffrey Mao sent in a tip. He says, "Your CBS convinced me to sign up for CBS All Access to watch Picard. What with the unconvincing short take setup, I've got NF D plus. CBS All Access is a hard fit for my budget. I want to watch The Expanse, Clone Wars, and other NF shows. Okay, never mind. Don't convince me." Well, Jeffrey Mao, I hated the CBS All Access app, and I watched Discovery. We ended up watching it through Amazon because you could get it in 5.1. Maybe they fixed the app to deliver that, but multi-channel sound's probably pretty important. But, yeah. Stub McShave sent in a tip and said, I saw that Will Wheaton would lead the commentary show for Picard called The Ready Room. I'm happy for him, but do you think he's free to express his views since CBS owns the commentary show? Can he say that an episode was crap and still keep his job? Stubble McShave, in a word, no. I don't think Will Wheaton has been tapped to be critical of the show. You know, it's an after show that's also being put on by CBS, so I think it's their desire to celebrate the show, and as a former castmate of Patrick Stewart's, and maybe he does in fact show up on Star Trek Picard, we don't know. I don't think it's his job to necessarily bag on the show, and I wouldn't do that if I were him. You know, I mean, for whatever we might think of Picard, and yes, I'm going into Picard. I want it to be good. Absolutely, do I want the show to be good? Please be good. Why wouldn't we want it to be good? I'm now more dubious than ever, but I do want it to be good. I don't know if it can be, but hope springs eternal. And until it's not good, until we've all been proven wrong, and I think the Children of Mars short take did not bode well for where the series is going to go, but we shall see. Emil Johansson says, Disney's going to assassinate you, Rob. I don't think so. I mean, the what came before, like with any other script, you know, there's a podcast, a great podcast that's produced over at the Electric Surge Network called The Best Movies Never Made, where they have filmmakers that were involved on projects that never got produced. And, you know, you're talking about something that never happened. Unfortunately, it never happened. And yes, I don't know. I mean, it's like every other project that doesn't get made. As Captain Kirk once said about what Elias Sandoval was doing on This Side of Paradise, he said, "Another dream that failed. There is nothing sadder." Anyway, Roberto Suarez says that this script sounds awesome. More, please. Okay, I can indulge you, Roberto. So basically, what ends up happening is that Rey, consulting the Jedi texts that we saw from Ashto in The Last Jedi, discovers not about the Jedi holocron, but or the Sith holocron. What she discovers, what she has read, is that underneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant is a communication system that predates. It's from the Old Republic. It's from over 1,000 years ago. It predates the Empire. And basically, this communication system is like the flames, the pyres that are lit by the Gondorians in Return of the King. This communication system is connected to 50 other planets. And this communication system can be activated underneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant if they can get there, and it will send a signal out that will hopefully get people who are waiting to hear this signal to come to the aid of the Resistance. A force beacon, as Rey calls it. And of course, Finn says there's no way it still works, and Poe comments that Old Republic technology is way better than the junk we have today. And that the First Order, who has choked off all communications between solar systems, star systems, can't do anything about this because it predates their technology. They wouldn't even be able to pick it up. They wouldn't know what it was. So they decide that they are going to go to Coruscant, see if they can get planetside, go to the Jedi Temple, and turn on this beacon that will hopefully attract all of, well, people they need. And Rey says that hope is all that they have left. And so Rey is also, she's still training, and as we see her training, Force Ghost Luke appears to her as she's in pain. She's not the all-powerful being that we saw in the finished rise of Skywalker, but she is training, overseen by Force Ghost Luke. So Force Ghost Luke is talking to both Rey and Kylo Ren. He's pushing Rey to become stronger in the Force, and he's trying to get Kylo Ren to pull back and let Ben Solo out, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. And definitely Luke is the Ben Kenobi, the Force Ghost Ben for both of the characters, which I thought was really an interesting way to go. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you go that way? And it's very interesting. So Kylo Ren makes it back to Coruscant, actually, and after being blasted by the Sith holocron, he's in bad shape. And his face is messed up, and he is actually, Mandalorian armor is being smelted, and they're putting it onto his face, his actual face, and it's sizzling into the skin. But they're using Mandalorian armor. Now, keep in mind, this was written in it was 2016, and he's got damaged veins down his neck. He is not looking good. It sort of reminded me about how Palpatine looked after his Force blast was deflected back at him by Mace Windu. That's probably where we were at with Kylo Ren. But Kylo Ren is not. He ends up okay, and he confronts Hux, and he says, I don't need titles. He doesn't need to be the Chancellor the way Hux is the Chancellor. And Kylo Ren, after he does get up, he's very dismissive. And of course, Luke is still trying to appeal to Rey, and Rey says things like, balance, the dark suffocates the light, light extinguishes the dark, over and over and over. How is that balance in the Force? Luke says, I know that anger. I had it. My father had it too. Rey says, so says my master, and his master before him, 1,000 masters so eager to tell us how to live. And Rey is basically, as Force Ghost Luke is talking to her, Rey has said, I spent my whole life wanting a family. I've got one now. I won't abandon them. And Luke says the Force is speaking to her. And Rey says, maybe I'm not who the Force thinks I am. And Luke says, who are you? And she says, I am no one. And what's really interesting about that is Luke says, if you really believe these things, then maybe the last Jedi is dead. And she says, maybe he is, referring to Luke. It's very interesting. And all of that I thought was really, really great stuff. And of course, then Kylo, of course, goes to Hux and says, there's places I have to go, there's people I have to see, and apparently all has been well in my absence. And Kylo Ren says to Hux, I don't need grand displays or processions or titles, Chancellor, and basically says, I've got better things to do. I've got stuff I need to do. And Hux says, is this power in the Sith texts? You found it? Kylo says, it's within my reach. And he actually says, the ability to destroy a planet will be insignificant, Kylo says. And Kylo says, find the resistance, wipe them out, and leave the girl to me. And then off he goes. And so in a nutshell, basically we have the script is then split. You've got the team that is going to Coruscant to try and light the beacon. That's Rose and Finn and R2 and 3PO. And R2 and 3PO in the script are awesome. They're awesome. Then you have Kylo and Rey are taking off for, Kylo is going to wherever the Sith base of operations is, kind of like Exegol, although in this script it's not Exegol. And then, of course, Rey also is going on her journey. She needs to find where she's supposed to go. She doesn't know. They don't have holocrons. They're not looking for daggers or any of that stuff. And there's a place that she thinks she needs to go. And so Rey and Poe and Chewbacca take off, and they're going to go basically to a planet and see if they can find somebody who can help Rey figure out where she is supposed to go. And then there's Leia back home with the troops, and you've got everybody splitting up. And it's really all the character interplay in the script is really, really great at this point. It really feels, I mean, this script is very much a Star Wars script. All of the interplay and the way they're now breaking apart, they're going on their various missions. I mean, it really does feel, if anything, if I could equate this to anything, it feels like Return of the Jedi with all the stupid shit cut out of it. It's really interesting, and I really, really liked the way it's all unfolding. All of the dialogue and it's all characterizations are great. And what was really interesting is that you find out that Finn, in the beginning of the movie, he met stormtroopers that he knew when he was being trained. And he realizes that there's a whole group of stormtroopers like him that are sort of lost. They feel bad about what's going on. They're not down with any of this. And Finn realizes that this could be an opportunity to exploit. And these children that the First Order has been taking are even though they've been trained and conditioned, that there's an opportunity here. And it's really great stuff. And then, of course, before Kylo leaves, he takes Darth Vader's mask and he says he understands Vader now, and he understands his weakness and your pain. And Kylo says, you allowed love to cloud your judgment. And Kylo throws off Vader's helmet off a balcony on Coruscant into the clouds, and it falls to the ground and shatters, and that's the end of that. And then Kylo is going to take off in his silencer and head off to find a planet called Remnicor, where everything he needs is supposedly going to be there. He says goodbye to Chancellor Hux and takes off. And then, well, let's see what anybody else has to say. Jason S. says, how does the Star Wars Duel of the Fates screenplay end the movie and wrap up the Star Wars episode franchise? And does it say what, if any, lineage that Rey has? Any other reveals? Oh, I'm not done, Jason. I'll continue on, and you shall see. But I'll answer your question. There is no lineage that Rey has. There is no Palpatine other than the hologram. And it's pretty great. It's pretty great what happens. And, of course, Anthony Gonzalez says, if you magically also happen to land Affleck's Batman script, do share it as well. Well, you know, again, I wasn't necessarily looking for that. There you go. Bunyan Snipe sent in a super chat and says, when it comes to integrity, you're a trillionaire. I don't know about that, but I appreciate that. NP94 says, what's your view of the TV show Clone Wars? I love the Clone Wars, and I think as it moved through its seasons, it got more and more interesting. And this script, when you're talking about where they need to go, which is ultimately Mortis, it came out of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars, it all ties into that, which I think is really, really, really interesting. So basically, you've got now Kylo has taken off, and he's supposed to go find this Sith Lord on the planet of Remnacor. Rey and Poe have taken off to find out where she's supposed to go to find Kylo Ren. She doesn't know where she's supposed to be or what's happening. And Leia and Rey, before they take off, by the way, before they leave, Rey has a great exchange with Leia, where and all of this, Rey is not... The great thing about this script is Rey is very much in doubt of who she is. She's not in command of all of her powers. She's obviously powerful, but she has this conversation where she's talking to Princess Leia, where Rey says she can save Kylo Ren. And Leia says, I believe that once, like you. Rey thinks there's good in him, a la Luke and Vader. And Leia says, there's good in all of us, but the boy she knows is gone. And that Rey says, well, Luke trained me well. And Leia says, you can't train for certain things. And Leia and her have this great exchange. And Rey says, there are rules, Jedi rules. And Leia says, written by who? Some old man 1,000 years before you were born. And then Leia says, my whole life I've heard about balance. And I don't even know what that means. And then Leia says, this is really interesting. You're not like my father or my brother. You're new. Whatever happens, Rey, remember the Force chose you, Rey. Your story isn't written by anyone else. And then basically what ends up happening after that is obviously the First Order was eventually able to track their missing Star Destroyer, and the rebel base on Korolev, kind of like what we saw, is evacuated. All the Eclipse Dreadnought now becomes the de facto headquarters of the Resistance, full of Imperial troops, and it's pretty great. And they escape, and then back on Coruscant, what ends up happening with Finn, Rose, R2, and 3PO is they end up actually infiltrating the Jedi Temple. They actually turn on the beacon. And when the beacon is turned on, there are cuts to different parts of the galaxy where you see different groups of people, certain monks receive this signal. There's even a scene where Bosk, bounty hunter Bosk, is in the proximity of one of these signals, and he's like living in the lap of luxury. He's clearly, it's the First Order, the rise of the First Order has been good for him, but when he sees this beacon, he sort of, you get this idea that he's questioning himself. So the beacon is out there, and it's being heard throughout the galaxy. And then, of course, it gets cut short by the First Order, who takes it down. And then, once that happens, Rose and Finn and R2 and 3PO then find themselves fleeing into the streets of Coruscant, and they find there is an entire underclass. All of the put upon people of Coruscant, the poor, the homeless, the people that have been choked off because of the First Order, they are ripe for a rebellion. And Finn and Rose and R2 and 3PO are just the people to mobilize that, to get those people ready to go and to rise up. They basically start an uprising, and they begin to organize that. And it's really interesting. And all of this stuff feels very, very Star Wars. It was really, really, really cool. And then at the same time, when, of course, like in the movie, where, like in Rise of Skywalker, when Rey and Poe leave, they're pursued by the Knife Nine with, of course, the Knights of Ren in it. And it's all very, very interesting. And they go to a planet called Bonadan. And the planet of Bonadan is where Rey is going to find out where she needs to go. Kylo lands on Remnacor, and Kylo confronts Tor Valum. Tor Valum is the Sith Master that the Emperor Palpatine was talking about. And Tor Valum is, the way it was written, I kind of imagine him as being it's kind of like Shelob or something, some kind of a creature. He's described as being 7,000 years old, an alien of unknown origin, spindly, intense, sinew and muscle, that kind of a thing. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like, somebody knew. And Kylo begins training with Tor Valum. Tor Valum is the Yoda to Luke in Empire Strikes Back, and that moves forward, and it's very, very interesting. What goes on between them. And eventually there's a scene, and this would have been epic, kind of like the cave in Dagobah, where Kylo Ren actually confronts Darth Vader. Now, it is a vision of Vader, but they fight. Darth Vader and Kylo Ren have a knockdown, drag-out duel. And of course, Kylo loses. And even though it's not really Vader, only what you take with you, but it's really interesting. And I was like, who wouldn't want to see that? And then, of course, Poe goes, I guess this would be the Zori Bliss scene, but when they land on Bonadan, that plays out very similar to what we saw in Rise of Skywalker, where basically they find a mystic, a seer, that is able to use what Rey has in her mind. Kind of like, it was sort of like my Minority Report. There's a scene where a wooden ball, like what the pre-crime people had, and they're able to derive a star chart from the vision she's had of Kylo, of where she is supposed to go. And it was good. And then at the same time, they're also being pursued by the Knights of Ren. And of course, Chewbacca is with them, and then the Knights of Ren find them all, and there's a big battle, and they escape. And eventually, Rey confronts the Knights of Ren, and there's an incredible battle. A huge lightsaber duel with her staff, double-bladed lightsaber. It's amazing, and it was terrific. And then all of these threads play out, and eventually, Kylo Ren and Rey find themselves on Mortis. Princess Leia goes and finds Lando Calrissian and asks if Lando will help organize the smugglers and join the fight. Rose is captured by the First Order and tortured, but eventually she's going to escape. Finn and R2 and 3PO are able to start a citizens' uprising on Coruscant, where the First Order capital, kind of around their headquarters, is. And then Princess Leia is going to bring the battle to Coruscant, and what ends up happening is Rey and, of course, Kylo, they, rather than be a Force dyad, it's the energy of the Force that they've learned to manipulate on Mortis, and they can take energy from each other because the Force binds the universe together, and they have this battle between the two of them. And at the end of their battle, Luke, Yoda, and Ben Kenobi appear as Force ghosts to help this battle, and they try and save Ben. They don't. Ben is extinguished. There is a massive space battle over Coruscant, and Rey, it's very interesting. There's this repeated thing where Rey is talking about no one is no one when Poe says no one is no one. Well, at the end, you find out Kylo Ren did, in fact, kill Rey's parents at the behest of Snoke, and then Rey is able to say, well, no one no one is no one, and she uses that again against Kylo Ren. So then it kind of all plays out, and at the end, Rey comes back. Coruscant is liberated. The First Order is destroyed, and the huge battle plays out kind of the same. Lando Calrissian shows up, but he shows up with the forces of the smugglers, all people like him and Bosk and everybody that was living on the fringes of the galaxy. And they all show up, and the battle over Coruscant is epic. You've got a ground battle. You've got the battle in the sky. You have Rey fighting Kylo, and it's all intercut. And it's really interesting. And I think one of my favorite parts in the battle is that at one point, Chewie ends up flying an X-Wing. And there's a scene where Chewbacca, behind the controls of an X-Wing, just kicks ass. It was amazing. So, what are my thoughts about all of this? I mean, this is basically, I've given you the gist of it all. I thought this script was incredible. I thought it read like, what was so great about it was the character interplay and all of the character moments in the movie. It wasn't just fan service. It all meant something. There's a lot of fan service sprinkling here and there, but really it was structured a lot more like Return of the Jedi. And I think the real problem that I have with Rise of Skywalker is if you look, there's a lot of where they came from Rise of Skywalker, from this to what Rise of Skywalker. There's a reason why Derek Connolly and Colin Trevorrow got story credit because, one thing I did forget. Yes, Han Solo is in this script. Han Solo does confront Kylo Ren. All of that business about Leia sensing him, all of that came out of this script. Harrison Ford was going to appear in this version of the movie. So I would say that I would dare say that they deserved screenplay credit, not just story credit. But maybe it was because the idea of Torvallum and all of that, that was a new character that I really liked. And eventually, of course, Kylo Ren kills that character. But it's a really great script. And I guess I was left perplexed by why they didn't go with this version of the script. I don't know what about it. I mean, the whole idea, going back to Coruscant and the big battle, the big space battle at the end, would take place both on the ground. Again, it's like Jedi. You have the most incredible space battle in orbit around the moon of Endor, and then you have what's going on down on Endor, trying to get rid of the shield generator, but in this case, it's an uprising. And there's even a great bit at the end where the First Order headquarters lifts off from Coruscant, and they're going to escape. It looks like they're going to escape, and it turns out that Rose Tico fucked with their nav computer, and you actually see the entire headquarters of the First Order go right into a planet. Because they didn't process their light speed connections well enough. And the script was great. I mean, I really liked it a lot. And I think that it was awesome. If I was able to, of course, if I was really able to read the script, I might have made all of this up, to be honest. Who knows, right? But I loved it. I mean, I loved the entire script. And it's interesting to me. I'll tell you something, though. I remember when, I won't say who, but before Phantom Menace came out, I was sent the Phantom Menace script by somebody I know. And it was the Phantom Menace script. And I read it, and you couldn't see the tone of how the script was going to be. When I read the script, I thought the Phantom Menace script was actually quite good. Yet, when I was reading a character like Jar Jar Binks, the portrayal in my mind of what Jar Jar Binks was not how it was portrayed on screen. The tone of the Jar Jar Binks character in my mind was very different than what wound up on screen. And it was interesting to see, going from the page to the translation, so much. You can have the best screenplay in the world, but it's the people that are realizing that screenplay and making a movie. That's what's really important. And whether or not everyone's on the same page, I think after reading this script, what I think was really problematic about the Rise of Skywalker is that once you bring Emperor Palpatine into the story, the question you're asking, everyone's asking, is how did any of this happen? And there was none of that in this script. Everything was very well explained. All the character motivations were great. There's character moments and character interplay with everybody, and it all means something. The fact that Rey had incredible self-doubt, the fact that Force Ghost Luke was haunting both Kylo and was advising Rey was really interesting. And by the way, it makes sense. Why wouldn't it make sense? It makes a lot of sense. He's got a connection to both of them. He was essentially training both of them. So Luke Skywalker had a much larger role. The end, while the details were different, the end plays out very similarly to what happened in Rise of Skywalker. But when you have, I understand where JJ goes. He sees probably great production artwork and is like, oh, I've got to have like 1,000 Star Destroyers in the sky, or I've got to have Palpatine. Let's bring the Emperor back. But the problem is, when you bring the Emperor back, if you don't explain how did the Emperor get off the Death Star? When we last saw the Emperor, he was falling down a pit, defeated. Apparently, he fell into some reactor core and it exploded, and then the Death Star itself blew up. And then you have to explain, how did this happen? And then not only that, when you have Exegol, there's a giant temple there. There's all these people on these ships. How did any of that occur? And I think one of the big problems, and the problem I have with J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker, is that he doesn't seem very concerned with these problems. If the visuals are interesting and he's able to show you a tableau or something that you are supposed to like the wrecked Death Star in an ocean, that's great. Okay, but does that make very much sense after we've seen The Last Jedi, or after we saw in Return of the Jedi, when you see the Death Star explode the way it exploded? Is there that much of the Death Star left, much less the throne room, which is in a little spire on the surface of the Death Star? So my problem with J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker has always been, I do not buy his stories from scene to scene to scene to scene. This Colin Trevorrow, Derek Connolly script read really well. It was tight. It was character-driven. It had interesting mythology around it. I like this character of Tor Valum. I like what happens to Kylo Ren in this script. It's all character-based. It's all really, really interesting. And the whole idea of returning to Coruscant and finding out that there are other, we found out in the movie, yes, there are other rogue stormtroopers in Rise of Skywalker. All of those ideas came out of this script, except this script presented them, I thought, in a much tighter, more believable, more interesting, and let's face it, much more Star Wars-esque than what we get in Rise of Skywalker. There was no running around for MacGuffins. The Sith holocron at the beginning is something it's just in Darth Vader's Mustafarian temple. No one has ever been there since he didn't come back, presumably. And it made sense that it was there. And it made sense that he went into that castle. We saw the castle in Rogue One. All of that was really great. And I think what this script did is it really took all of the Star Wars mythology that has been built up over the last, since Lucasfilm was taken over by Disney. It really tied all of this together. And it didn't, while I thought the script was a great capper to The Force Awakens and to Rise of Skywalker. In fact, to me, it made it really great, and it was really concerned with modern Star Wars mythology, like the Clone Wars stuff, dealing with the Mortis, the world of Mortis, and all of that. All of that was in there, and it really, it's baffling to me that there, like as was reported in the articles that I started with, that Kathleen Kennedy was at odds with Colin Trevorrow. And I really can't quite understand it, because I really thought all of the characters were given a chance to shine. R2 and 3PO have heroic moments. Chewbacca in an X-Wing fighter. There was so much great stuff in it, but it felt like a Star Wars movie, and it didn't feel gimmicky. It was all new, and it was all sort of earned, and it all made sense. And when I read this script, I have to say, if I actually read it, I mean, I might not have. I might be making all of this up, to be honest. I'm not. But, it was interesting. It's an interesting glimpse into what could have been. I'm really sort of bummed out about it because I think this script it worked on its own terms, but mostly what I really loved about it was the characterizations. All of the different relationships. You had Finn and Rey, you had Poe and Rey, you had Rey and Kylo, you had Rey and Luke. And then you had Luke and Kylo. It was Rose and Finn, R2 and 3PO, Rose and Finn, BB-8, Chewbacca. I mean, all of it all really, really worked well. And I loved scenes like when they ignite the temple beacon using the giant kyber crystal that's underneath. The idea they touch on the fact that the old Republic had technology that was way better than the technology of today, setting up a potential going back in time, whether it's 400 years or whether it's the Knights of the Old Republic. Obviously, Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly, they knew their Star Wars. And there was never a moment where I'm like, wait, what? Like, come on, you're holding a dagger out and it's going to show you exactly where you're supposed to go, as in Rise of Skywalker. There was none of that. It all made sense. It was all really interesting. There was no dangling plot threads. It all really was very, very tight, and I quite enjoyed it. And it did make me sad for what we didn't get. I think, I totally get it. I totally understand when after Last Jedi came out and after what was happening with Solo, as the article said, Kathleen Kennedy had no desire. She wasn't on the same page with Colin Trevorrow. But it's really interesting because if you look at Frank Marshall and his relationship with Colin Trevorrow, I mean, Colin Trevorrow is coming back, and obviously that Jurassic World short that he directed was really great. And I'm sort of baffled. I mean, I never know what's going to happen. Obviously, the high stakes of what the closing out movie of the trilogy meant. But I just can't help but think that this script seemed, it was Star Wars from beginning to end. Going from the Kuat shipyards, learning about the world of Mortis, which came out of the Clone Wars, and you had the Force Ghosts, and Luke had a great role in this. I mean, Mark Hamill would have knocked this out of the park, and it was really great. I mean, the script was really great, and I really don't understand what the problem was and what they wanted to see more of. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. Anonymous tipped me and says, have you ever considered selling all your toys and collections for cash to make your own film? Well, I did make my own film, as many people know. I made Free Enterprise, starring Eric McCormack from Will and Grace and William Shatner. And of course, I'm wrapping up producing Tango Shalom, a movie that I produced and edited. And hopefully I'm going to have some big news about that movie shortly. And a movie that I edited also, the short film Skyfighter, is dropping on the Dust Network. But I could sell all of my collectibles and they would not get me enough money to make the kind of film that I would want to make. And look at all this. I mean, all the books, all the things that surround me. You can't. I look at all the stuff that I have. I mean, if you look at everything here in the Robservatory, yes, it's a collection that spans. Literally, there are things in here that I've had since I was like 8. It's a lifetime of collecting books and things like that. But you can't. Books aren't really. I hate to say it. As much as I love my omnibuses and things like that, books, just not worth that much, which is kind of a bummer. I thought about it. I just don't know where that would ever go with me. So, Do It for Cash sent a super chat in and says, "Who decided not to keep Chewie in an X-wing?" I don't know. I really don't know. It's. I read this script and I'm just like, who wouldn't want to make this? That was the thing I didn't understand. I just didn't. I don't know. It baffles me. I don't know the look. I understand. You have to understand, like with Star Wars, what they needed to do was, after all of the what happened with Solo and what happened with Last Jedi, not just the fan backlash, but even the fact that you make a movie that makes $2 billion, the percentage of Last Jedi making, only 1.3 billion, that's still a $700 million deficit. That's huge. And, all of that has to be taken care of, and all of that has to be accounted for, and people wonder what the heck is going on. And I can't imagine, I don't think any person, any producer has had as much pressure put on them as Kathleen Kennedy had when Lucasfilm was taken over by Disney. Because when you spend $4 billion, you have to produce. And unlike the MCU, when Disney acquired the MCU, they were already making movies. They had their success with Iron Man. They were already moving forward. So they had an apparatus, and Kevin Feige had people who were all in place. Louis D'Esposito, the people that he was working with. He had a team, but Kathleen Kennedy didn't. When Lucasfilm was acquired, there was nobody making Star Wars movies, so they had to start from scratch. So, you got to give it up for her for the amount of pressure. It's between serving the corporate interests and trying to tell corporate interests, as we've talked about many times on the show, have no bearing on great storytelling. Because a corporation, the decisions that a corporation is going to make are inherently not compatible with telling great stories. With great stories, you have to take chances, and you have to expand what people expect. You have to subvert expectations to tell a great story. And a corporation wants to appeal to the most amount of the world. They want the biggest audience, so they don't want to subvert expectations. They want to give the audience the easiest thing to swallow, so the most amount of people will buy it. But what's really interesting about that is when you're talking about a major franchise, you're still, you have to look not just at the fan base. I think that there's a mistake. And I think it's a mistake that we as fans have. And the mistake is, you got to give the fans what they want. And I would say that's wrong thinking, because you have to ask yourself, what made people fans in the first place? That what was good about Star Wars and what created Star Wars fandom was baked into Star Wars from the get-go. When Star Wars came out, there were no Star Wars fans. There was something in Star Wars that created fans. And then what you should be seeking is that. What is that special sauce? What is that thing, that quality that made Star Wars appeal and continue to appeal over 40 years since it debuted? I mean, we're now 43 years away from May 25th, 2020 will be 43 years since Star Wars debuted. So what is it about Star Wars? What is that timeless quality that brought fans and kept fans over the years, year after year, decade after decade? Generations of people love Star Wars. Why? Why do they love it? And I'll tell you one thing. A corporation does not know the answer. A corporation has to buy it, but then a corporation has to figure out, you have to let the people that know what they're doing, those filmmakers that can go, and I think Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly with this script, with their vision, their Duel of the Fates script, absolutely nailed Star Wars. And they would have given the fan base something to love. They would have really, I don't think these characters, even more so than Rian Johnson's movie, the way these characters are written, they're like little runner jokes that are paid off. The idea, when Poe says to Rey, no one is no one. And then Rey using that line against Kylo when Kylo's trying to get to her at the end when they're having their force battles and he's trying to tell her once again, you are no one. And then she returns that and says, no one is no one. So she's using something Poe told her and turning it around. It's a setup and a payoff. And the screenplay is really, really full of that. And the idea that Finn is somebody, you get to see his personal uprising, which was realizing from the very beginning of Force Awakens that, and they'd never played into this very well, that he was a stormtrooper that didn't believe, he turned his back on what he'd learned. And for that to be brought up, for Finn to become a symbol of all of these downtrodden people, including former stormtroopers and rallying them up, because it finishes Finn's journey from where he first rebelled as a stormtrooper, and then to watch him lead a citizens' uprising en masse on Coruscant. I mean, this was great stuff. This worked, and this is great storytelling. And I'm sad that it didn't get made. And I'm also pretty. There was a lot of this script that did the structure, the base ideas were all there. What we saw in Rise of Skywalker, I just thought that they were far better executed in this script. And it's really interesting because one of the things I think that's been forgotten is you can have as much imagery as you want with crashed Star Destroyers on Jakku, or you on another moon of Endor, seeing the Death Star in the ocean. Hey, look, that's cool stuff. But what really makes it is all the character bits, because all of that's just background. And you've got to get the Star Wars characters right. And this script really, really nailed that. And I'm sad to see that this script wasn't the one that was being made, because bringing it back to Coruscant and seeing an uprising happen from the ground up, it really... there's even a moment when the beacon is lit that you see Broom Boy from the end of The Last Jedi. Really interesting. Really, really, really well done. And I'm sad. I'm sad that we don't get to see that. Echo Based Network says, if your house was burning down and you could only save what you could cart in your hands, what would it be? Well, the best thing is that I'm in a building that's not attached to my house. So what would I take in my hands? You know what? I'd have to say I'd have to make sure that the ladies I live with were safe, because of all the things that I own, of course, nothing is more precious than Elizabeth, her daughters, Zoe and Sophie. They would have to be the first people, the first things, the only things really. Everything else can be replaced. If there's one thing I've learned as a collector and as a fan, everything can be replaced. People cannot. If I were to die tomorrow, this stuff would still be here, but I wouldn't be here to talk to you. So, yes, but it's a good question. But I know what you mean. That's kind of also, I don't know. I don't know if there's any, I think, I don't know what that would be. I would probably take, I've got some tubs of my memories of things I've done since I was a kid, report cards, things like that. I'd probably take that, because those are things about me. All the rest of this stuff, it's just an external representation of who I am as a person. And it can all be got again. I mean, there's nothing in here. I don't know if there's anything that I have that can't be acquired again. But the people and the memories and the things that are personal, I think, matter more than anything else. Simon Gilmore says, rule number 1, never use your own money to finance a film. That is absolutely true. Absolutely true. 100%. That is absolutely true. Dan V900 sent a $4.99 super chat. It seemed like the problem was the Book of Henry, with the negative reviews and reaction to that movie was where Kennedy panicked. She didn't trust him. Well, I understand the pressure that she's under. She couldn't go through another scene with what happened with Solo, but I would say, look, so Book of Henry didn't play the way people wanted it to play. It did get made. It's not like that film. It might not have been a critical darling, but you do have Jurassic World to look on, and that did okay. That came out okay. And I think Kathleen Kennedy was married to Frank Marshall, so she could have easily heard. But I think it might have played into it. I don't know. I think the problem was, again, with the amount of pressure, unless the script itself was I don't know, glowing with the power of God or the power of the Force, I don't think anybody, and judging from what we've heard coming out of Disney or the rumors about what was going on about the Rise of Skywalker and the reshoots and the edits, everybody was second guessing themselves. Nobody was going to win this one. And I think what's unique, what I think is sort of self-evident, is if Colin Trevorrow was allowed to make this script as it was written, bringing the chops he obviously showed in Jurassic World and having the characters that we already had established, I think it would have been a terrific film. I think it would have pleased the fans, because one of the things that even Star Wars fans, anybody who likes Star Wars, if you are asking yourself, okay, Palpatine's back, how? And you never, your answer is that some line that he spoke in the prequel trilogy. You can't not do that. And so ultimately, while it's cool to see Palpatine, where does his fleet of Star Destroyers come from? Who built them? And there's too many, and I feel the same way about all of J.J. Abrams' science fiction movies. I just watch these films, I'm like, wait a minute. Well, come on. I don't believe it. There's no verisimilitude. This script had Star Wars verisimilitude in it. And everything that made it cool was earned. I mean, even when it would have sucked because what happened to Carrie Fisher, but when Leia goes to get Lando Calrissian, even the interplay that they have, the brief stuff where he tries to kiss her hand and she's like, come on, dude. I mean, there was so many great moments. It was chock-a-block full of Star Wars moments, and they were all character-based. And it was great. It was really, really good. Echo Base Network also says, can you confirm a quick appearance on our live stream after the premiere of our documentary this Saturday evening, 7 to 9 p.m. your time? Yeah, I'll be on your documentary podcast. I look forward to that. Timula the Spider Monkey says, I had under 5 minutes in the rocking machine pool today on John's show. It was gone at the 8-minute mark. Oh, well, hope to have better luck tomorrow. I don't think John knows what that is. Doesn't know the rocking machine. That's so funny. I always feel bad. I always forget about it. And he was not on me. And I figured, I can grab it now. And then I turn around and I got busted. He put me on camera. I was so bummed out. But yeah, indeed, that was a bummer. Emil Johansson sends in a super chat and says, I don't think Kathleen Kennedy deserves hate, but she was wrong. You know what? It's easy to Monday morning quarterback. The amount of pressure on her and what she had to do. I mean, remember, look, Rise of Skywalker is probably going to end making less money than Rogue One, but it's still going to cross $1 billion, which is a feat. Should it have made more money? Probably. It still made $1 billion. It's $1 billion. I mean, it didn't do what Solo did. It's going to make $1 billion. As a matter of fact, let's see where we're at. Let's see where we're at right now. I don't know. Where are we at as far as Rise of Skywalker goes? Let's see if they've put in the actuals. Worldwide, The Rise of Skywalker is at $989,968,274. Now, it's been out for 24 days. And how the domestic, what's really telling about that is the domestic of this is I think, obviously America is Star Wars home. So it'll be, let's see, let me look up. This is interesting. So Star Wars The Force Awakens. This is the most telling thing of all. The domestic take for Star Wars The Force Awakens was $936,662,225. 45.3% of its take was domestic. Right now, we are at $478,297,724 domestic. Basically half. The Rise of Skywalker is half of Force Awakens domestic take. That is very, very, very telling. And that's what I think people should be worried about. What's really interesting is also the international take is at half and obviously you can't really measure anything to Force Awakens because it was an anomaly. So it was not something that you're going to see happen a lot. And I think that's really interesting. Yeah. In a way, but you can't, you can blame Kathleen Kennedy if you want, but I would implore everyone to remember the pressure that she was under. And nothing, can you imagine? Nothing was going to work. And there was nothing anybody would have been satisfied by. However, what's really interesting is I do think that if they'd gone with this script, it would have been a movie that people would have loved. That's the ironic part about it. I think people would have loved it because ultimately what I think was really important was, yeah, the visuals of the destroyed Death Star are really great. And seeing Kylo confront Han Solo. And by the way, you saw Kylo as a young boy. During the scene when he's confronting Han Solo, it was more of like a 2001 thing where his age was, he was flipping through ages. It was just, to me, it was just a more intellectual script, and it was also a more character-driven script, and I just think it worked out. It just worked better. But, again, coulda, shoulda, woulda. It's an interesting examination into what might have been. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the same thing would have happened had it wouldn't have been interfered with. People would have second-guessed it. You don't know. Here's a letter from Darren Seeley. This is actually a complete change of pace. Rob, the other day, Robservations 316, that was yesterday's show, a member of the Post-Geek Singularity asked you the odd question of your favorite topless scenes. Topless scenes aren't something I have a top 10 for. I mean, sure, there's maybe the first time you see nudity on screen in a theater with a bunch of folks, or gasp, your first date with your girlfriend or your mom. Choose wisely, fellas. Choose wisely. Might be a memorable occasion. Over time, the novelty loses luster for one reason or another. I mean, I skip Linnea Quigley's graveyard dance in Return of the Living Dead now. Although that's actually a fully nude scene, and I don't skip over the topless zombie corpse on the slab. Go figure. And it's been ages since I watched Lair of the White Worm with Amanda Donahoe, although I still have that poster and didn't care much for the film itself. Once novelty wears off, if it goes on for more than a minute, I know that A, it's there to fill time in a weak story or plot, and or B, it's time to hit fast forward because I'm bored. If it does not serve a purpose for the story or character, I zone out. There was a time in the early 90s where I was slightly fascinated with the niche B-film DTV erotic thrillers and Andy Sedaris films. But that was a phase I got over in time, and today I wouldn't watch half of that stuff now, just not on religious principles, but for the sake of humanity. But after thinking it over, I thought about what wasn't a favorite, but something that stood out as memorable. The ones that I recall the best are those that served a story purpose, advanced character, and never brought the pace of a film to a screeching halt. It wasn't my favorite film, but yeah, the masked ball scene in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut would qualify as memorable. Not just the haunting, backwards Gregorian chant by Jocelyn Pook, but the tension. As you know, this is not the place to be loitering around uninvited. But I'm not writing this to you about Eyes Wide Shut. Rather, it's one of the titles that the other viewers brought up. Valley Girl. I considered that for a minute. I said to myself, I again wouldn't say it is a favorite, but yeah, it stands out due to its storytelling context, how unromantic it is, and how those and other topless scenes came to be in Valley Girl. I would just like to point out that I was one of the producers of the Valley Girl DVD, and that footage was ported over, our special features were ported over to the recently released Shout Factory Blu-ray, and I want to shout out to Greg Carson from MGM, and also to Dave Parker, who did a lot of heavy lifting on that disc. According to the audio commentary from director Martha Coolidge, the topless scenes were a compromise to get the film made her way, due to Atlantic releasing thinking that Valley Girl would need a checklist of female nudity to, quote, bring in the boys. After all, these are the early 80s, as teen sex comedies were in flux, for better or worse. They didn't care where those scenes were or how they would be filmed, just so long as she hit a quota. As it turns out, the film stood out because in every instance, there was a story purpose for them. It is interesting that a film you mentioned, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, released a year before Valley Girl, also had topless scenes that not only served a story purpose, but also was directed by a woman. Both films deal with teen peer pressure and insecurities, and both have moments of dark places as a consequence to some of those pressures. There's also another topless scene which I would say is which I would say is my favorite, come to think of it. But it's for the setup and payoff regarding a different character played by Michelle Meyerink. More on that near the end. Yeah, that was actually a great misdirection. I don't know about Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but I understand that a remake of Valley Girl has been filmed and is supposed to be released sometime this coming May. It was to be released earlier, but it was postponed due to the controversy over one of its cast. The film is a musical, and to my knowledge will be rated PG-13. Maybe the film itself will do all right. Hard to know at this point. I'd like to see what actress Chloe Bennett could do outside of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but she's playing Karen, the new Julie, played by Deborah Foreman in the original. There is still a Randy. There is also a Lauren. I don't know if Tommy's been renamed, but I suspect he is. The remake is directed by Rachel Lee Goldenberg. Again, I hope they do well. But I wonder, in a PG-13 musical, how will they handle that encounter between Lauren and Tommy? Is that part of a song? While it's good they're no longer bound by a quota, that one scene between the two of the characters raises an interesting conflict. In the original film, Tommy seduces Lauren privately, gets her to unwittingly betray one of her best friends, Julie, and did so only to have a conquest. Before they go further, she asks him if this act means they will be going together. He humiliates her, leaves, and says it doesn't mean anything other than playing her. Julie falls for Randy, who goes to a different high school, listens to different music, and he's not from the Valley. Randy's attracted to Julie, and they start seeing each other. But Randy is still regarded as an outsider, and Julie's inner circle of friends do not approve. Tommy is likewise jealous. He even throws Randy out of the party. It isn't Tommy's house, but Susie's parents'. More on this later, I promise. Not just for Randy being an outsider, but talking to Julie. This action did not deter Randy, who snuck back in. Throughout the rest of the film, Tommy attempts to slime his way back into Julie's graces and uses her friends to pressure Julie into dumping Randy, and that includes Lauren, who also doesn't approve of Randy, but she knows Tommy is not a good guy and wants to speak up, but has to back up her circle of friends, and Tommy is popular. I don't know how this scene or series of events would play out in a modern context. A young lady was, by definition, sexually assaulted. She was humiliated, yet she can't tell anyone. Even by the end of the film, she remains silent, but Tommy does get a deserved comeuppance. Why? Embarrassment? Peer pressure? What will her friends think? What will her best friend think? Will she be shamed again? Targeted with gossip, get a bad reputation? These are complex questions in a teen setting, of which we might think there's an easy answer. Just expose Tommy for the creep he is. But maybe it isn't. Would this moral character dilemma play a part in the upcoming remake? Could a modern audience accept such a conflict? Could an argument even be made that in the original film, in keeping her silence, is Lauren a bad friend after all? Again, I don't know how the remake is going to do, or how they would handle this, if at all. Anyway, that's why I say that the scene between Tommy and Lauren is noteworthy. But you know, as I thought about Valley Girl some more, I stand corrected. There was a favorite topless scene in the film. It's only for a second, but it gets an earned laugh. That's the bait and switch scene where you think shy teen Skip is making out with Beth, who is Susie's mom. Beth seems to be a bit of a cougar, and prior to this thought Skip was flirting with her, and she flirted back. In truth, he was interested in her daughter Susie. No, I don't think this funny scene would play in the remake, even to a different song than Sparks' Monster of Love. But it was set up, and it was paid off. It wasn't the nude scene itself, though, just the joke, and I guess that qualifies. Anyway, that's my process for the evening. And again, this comes from Darren Seeley. Well, Darren, first of all, let me just say this is one of the best letters I've ever received here. I'm proud to call you a member of the Post-Geek Singularity community because obviously Valley Girl I have a soft spot for it, having worked on the original DVD documentary footage, and we did interview a lot of the actors who were in the film. Unfortunately, not Deborah Foreman, but everybody else. E.G. Daly, who played Lauren, and we had a lot of great fun making this. But I've often thought that this movie, the reason I think Valley Girl endures, obviously it's a riff on Romeo and Juliet, and the idea of being different, especially kids today, probably look at this and are like, we would embrace those people. But you're right. I think the sexual politics of the film are pretty deep and relatively disturbing in our modern age, especially in the wake of the Me Too movement. I can't imagine that they would have these kinds of things. The idea of topless scenes in movies and gratuitous female nudity is something I think it's pretty much gone away. And I feel exactly like you do. Look, I grew up watching a lot of exploitation cinema. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of sex scenes in films. There was a lot of gratuitous nudity. I mean, I remember when I was, 13 and we got cable for the first time, watching movies like Van Nuys Boulevard or Malibu Beach, or there was all kinds of these raunchy teen comedies or teen films. Then you had even theatrically released ones like Porky's. And nowadays, I think really teen films have become relatively chaste unless you're watching Euphoria or something on HBO, in which case they've gone the other direction. But I think you're absolutely right. In my mind, watching films, I don't like films that when sex scenes kill the plot. And like you said, if sex scenes, I think, are vital to the plot, like in Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat or like in Basic Instinct. I mean, Basic Instinct, you're seeing sex becomes a suspense scene. And even Paul Verhoeven, if you go back and you read about how he would storyboard his sex scenes, like Hitchcock. And he really used those scenes. And Paul Verhoeven, if you watch his Dutch work, I mean, the Dutch are certainly not shy and timid about sexuality. And a lot of his, even going back to Business is Business, is one of his first features, Paul Verhoeven never shied away from that. But he always, his sex scenes meant something. There was actually plot happening. And whether it was Katie Tipple or, Turkish Delight, and Basic Instinct and Spetters and all that, there was something going on there. And Basic Instinct, absolutely, sex scenes drove the plot. Eyes Wide Shut, the same thing. You're being reminded that Tom Cruise is not supposed to be here and he's going to get in trouble. And I understand it all goes back to the idea of marriage and fidelity and all that. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the scene with Lauren it was meant to be disturbing. And I think it really plumbs a depth that Martha Coolidge got away with in the context of that movie, when otherwise it's romantic and buoyant and fun, but it does not shy away from getting very, very dark. And I think that needed to be there. And I think it elevates Valley Girl and makes it a better movie. It could have been much more lightweight. I think nowadays, it's very strange. I mean, when you can log on to RedTube or Pornhub and you can watch all kinds of free porn and get whatever you want. I don't know if there's even a place for that kind of nudity in movies today. I don't know. And it's strange. I mean, when I worked on Femme Fatales, we were required to have, they literally they timed how long our topless scenes were. That was a series that I was directing. I did 5 episodes for HBO Cinemax of Femme Fatales, and they literally did that. And it always struck me as sort of strange. We tried to make Femme Fatales it was more of an anthology crime thriller. We tried to lean into those things, but the network really just wanted a bunch of topless sex scenes, and we tried to make something we tried to sneak in more plot. And it always struck me as sort of a throwback when we were doing it. But it's an interesting question. And yeah, I thought it was a funny question to be asked yesterday, but your great letter has made me realize that there's a lot more to this than initially meets the eye. What a great letter. Again, I mean, this is an example of the kind of letters, who would have thought a letter about Valley Girl would have gone in and plumbed such depths and become so interesting. By the way, if you guys want to write me and contact me and send me letters to be read on this show, you can go to the Burnettwork.net website. And there's places to send me videos if you want to send me videos. One of the things I want to do is obviously play more videos showing me where you guys are from and what you might have to say. And it's you can also see the letters I read there if you want to comment on them yourselves. This letter comes from Tom Bidiscum. Hi, Rob. I'm an avid Star Wars fan. I'm 32 and I grew up watching all the movies repeatedly. Me too. I always had great respect for Star Trek but was never a fan. Then the 2009 film came out. I really enjoyed it and it made me want to go back and watch the original series. I have to say, from the first episode, I was hooked. It has such well-written characters. I will admit, I still have not watched all of them, but from what I've seen, I love it. I even think it has aged well. Obviously, the effects are dated, but the stories feel universal. Over the past 10 years, I've become a big fan of Star Trek. Then I started watching the movies featuring the original cast. My favorite are Star Trek The Voyage Home and Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. Although, I was very disappointed by Star Trek Discovery. It was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. I still have Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise to watch, but I look forward to it. Live long and prosper, Tom B. Well, Tom, as much as I rail about J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies, which I cannot abide, the one great byproduct is what you've just talked about. How you watched Star Trek '09 and it made you go back and seek out the original series. I love hearing I love hearing this from people. I think it's amazing when people find the original series. And if you found it because of Star Trek '09, well, then Star Trek '09 did its job. And I'm glad that you enjoyed Star Trek and found something of value. I think that's terrific. And I want to thank you for writing in. I mean, I love hearing these stories. You warm my little heart when I hear these things, and I think it's great. So thank you very, very much. This is sort of interesting. This letter comes from Simon Gilmore. Simon Gilmore, a member of the Post-Geek Singularity, who you hear from, who I hear from, we heard from today. Greetings, magnificent moron. That's what it says. Greetings, magnificent moron, and the Post-Geek Singularity. As a filmmaker myself, I can attest that nobody goes into making a bad movie. Hear, hear. I totally agree with that. The director and company always have the best intentions. So, why do we have so many poorly made movies? I recently saw an interview with Steven Spielberg. The interview asked what is the biggest obstacle he sees in directors. His response was that 90% of the time, a director doesn't know what he wants or how to get it. I have found this to be true. For example, a few years ago, a good friend of mine got his film funded for $5.5 million. The script was solid and well written. He had a talented cast and a great producer. He himself is a competent director. After all was said and done, he himself is a competent director. But after all was said and done, the film was a dismal mess. Looking back, he told me that it was because he didn't know what he wanted his actors to say or do, or what emotion he wanted to be portrayed in a given scene, or how to get his actors to do it. I told him what Spielberg said in the interview, and he completely agreed. This got me thinking that is one of the major reasons why we get such poorly done films. It's not the talent or lack of a good story. It's the knowing what you want and how to interpret that on screen, which is a difficult thing to do in itself. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents in and see what you think of this theory. Well, Simon, I think it's absolutely a very sound theory, and you're absolutely right. It seems strange that you would have somebody who is directing a movie and doesn't know what they want. And I'll tell you, I've often said on this show that if you're a director, you ever find yourself in a position where you're going to be able to direct a movie, it is very apparent to your crew. You basically have until lunch to win your crew over. And how do you win a film crew over? A film crew wants to do nothing more than to make sure the director gets what he wants. Every person in a film crew, whether it's a production assistant, whether it's the makeup and costume people, whether it is the cinematographer, whatever department you're talking about, every single person on a film crew is working hard to make sure that the director's vision, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, whether it's an elder statesman, or whether it's a first-timer, they all want to make sure that the director is getting what they need to make the movie good. Because all the different departments are not thinking about the big picture. They are thinking about the scene that is being shot right then and there. What is in the frame? What needs to be there? The production designer, the art department, the art director, they all want to make sure that the set looks great, that all the actors have the props they need, whatever. That's the prop department, but it comes out of the art department as well. The cinematographer wants to make sure the lighting is just perfect. The hair and makeup people want to make sure their actors look great. And all of that is on a moment-to-moment, scene-by-scene basis. The crew is expecting that the director has the big picture in mind, that they know from shot to shot, from scene to scene, that the movie that everybody is working so tirelessly to make is being realized. And the only person who knows that is the director. And no one, the worst thing that can happen to a film crew, the worst thing that you can do to your crew is to not let them know what it is that you want. Because not only can they not do their job on a scene-to-scene or a shot-to-shot, scene-to-scene basis, you demoralize a crew because they know that all the work they're going to do, whether it's for a couple of weeks or whether it's for months at a time, all the work that they are tirelessly trying to achieve is going to be all for naught if the director does not have a clear vision. And when I say a clear vision, the director knows what every single setup means, what every single camera move means, knows what everything that's going on in that frame, how it's going to work, and what it is going to amount to. And a crew knows very well whether or not the director knows what they're doing. And that's why I say, by lunch on the first day, the crew knows. And the last thing in the world that you want to do is let your crew down as a director. Because here's the thing. Your crew will never let you down. That's why they're there. They've already been able to deliver time and time again. And if you're a director, if you're a first-time director, your crew, remember this. They have been on films before. They're going to be on films far after you are if you don't succeed in doing what you're trying to do. Your job is to know what it is you are doing at every moment, all day long, 24/7, or the 12 hours you're shooting, or whatever. If you're a film director, take that into consideration. Never, ever do not know what you are doing from moment to moment while you are shooting, because a film crew is one of the greatest luxuries that you as a human being can ever be afforded, because, man, there is nothing better than watching, I'll say it, watching a union crew working at the height of their powers. So if you ever get an opportunity to direct something, do your homework. Make sure you know exactly what you want. Everybody will thank you, from your actors all the way down to the PA who's going to get you coffee and is terrified that they didn't put, whether it was equal or sweet and low, if you've ever watched Swimming with Sharks. Everybody on a film set is there to make sure your vision is realized. And I think Steven Spielberg was absolutely correct. And Simon, great letter. Thanks for writing that in. It's amazing, but it's true. It's absolutely true. Joshua Levesque is here. He has been a longtime supporter of the channel and of me on social media. Hey, Rob, love the show and your Robservatory. Also, thanks for the mention in your Raylo letter, Willow. You are an unparalleled legend. Anyway, I've had the extreme displeasure of fooling myself into thinking that I would enjoy seeing Cats, kind of like you enjoy hate watching Manifest, no matter how bad it was. By the way, I did catch up with the first episode of Manifest, and I was not disappointed. Boy, does that show not know where it's going. Dear merciful God, was I dead wrong? Within the first few minutes, I found myself getting lulled into a psychedelic state of unease. Unlike many weird quirks in some movies, my mind could never accept the actors prancing around as cats. Even the actors' on-screen energy made it seem like they had a massive orgy before sensually crawling around in each scene. Speaking of sensual energy, I was never able to unsee Ian McKellen lapping up hair as he strokes his hand with his tongue, and for that, Tom Hooper will forever be in my debt. It got to the point where I stopped myself 30 minutes in and I wondered, is the state of my sanity worth watching the rest of this wretchedly awful cat-atomic meltdown of a movie? Cat-atomic meltdown. I love that. The pure hypnotic awfulness was like a car crash in the sense that it demands your attention and it's hard to look away. And when the actors' hairy faces started to separate from their heads, I thought, it can't get worse than this. But it does. A musical number consisting of human-faced cockroaches and mice comes singing onto screen. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I believe Tom Hooper made this movie, if that's what you want to call it, to convert people into getting rid of their cats and becoming dog owners. If so, mission accomplished. To top things off, this movie has no discernible plot. It honestly feels like Tom Hooper filmed the Broadway play, inserted some famous singers, and added movie-level effects in post-production. If you or any of the viewers have the misfortune of watching this inconsolable psychedelic train wreck, may whatever God you believe in have mercy on your soul. You know what? Perfect timing. As I finished reading this, Gilbert came right in back to the Robservatory. Well, Joshua, I am sorry that happened to you. Kind of a bummer. But, I don't know if you know what? I'll probably end up having, once Cats is on cable, I'll bet you that everybody in the world probably sits down and watches it, if only because they're going to want to see what happened. It's like Bill Murray in Tootsie, when he talks about being the playwright who says he just wants a little audience of people that came in from the worst rainstorm ever, and he wants them to say to him at the end, I saw your play, man. What happened? Gilbert's barking. Gilbert, why are you barking? And I'm running out of cookies, but since it's been 2 hours, it's like Kirk on the Genesis planet. It's been 2 hours. You ready? Okay, there you go. You have a cookie. Where's your sister? She's not here, so you get a second cookie. That's it. I hope the monthly supply of cookies shows up, because that's all I got for you, buddy. That's all I have. I don't know what to say. I mean, you can only do so much, right? What can I do? I only have so many cookies. Not everybody gets a cookie. Isn't that what life's all about? Not everyone gets a cookie, and Gilbert clearly wants more. But I don't know what to say about that. I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Really. I don't know. Let's see where we're at. It's been a long one. Let's see. Cardinal Sin sent in a super chat. Hang on a second. Let me go back. There's a lot of people here. John DeBenedict sent in a $2 super chat and says, so no Raylo kiss in this script. Sad. Nope, there's no Raylo kiss in that script. Stubble McShave says, how impactful would the death of Carrie Fisher have been on filming this script? Would they have had to rework big parts of it? Was it doable without her? Honestly, Leia was a big part of this script. I don't know if it would necessarily have worked without her. So her loss would have been certainly felt. I mean, maybe they could have done more with it. I don't know. Cardinal Sin. Let me see if I was missing Cardinal Sin's super chat. I'm looking. How far back? Yeah, Cardinal Sin. Cardinal Sin. Oh, maybe. Cardinal Sin said, hi, Laser Bob. Laser Bob was my name at Seattle Silver Platters when I worked there. Do you know what they did? Hi, Laser Bob. Do you know what they did to Laser Bob? That is a reference to Escape from New York. That's very funny. Fresno Bob. What do you think are the best screenwriters? Who are the best screenwriters living today, or from the 80s forward to today? Oh my God. Well, I think certainly Steve Zalian, who's up for an Academy Award, is probably one of the great screenwriters of the modern age. Quentin Tarantino is, I think, a great screenwriter. Gosh, I mean, there's so many. I'd have to think about that. I thought Andy Kevin Walker. I go back and he was a really great screenwriter. I mean, those are the people that are off the top of my head. There's a lot of great people. I think Rian Johnson, despite what people say about Last Jedi, I really like the script he had for Knives Out. I really liked his script for Brick. There's a lot of people. I mean, I tend to gravitate toward writer directors. So, yeah, but that's just off the top of my head. That's what I was thinking about. That's what comes to me. It's so funny. Stubble McShave says, "Oh, you already asked about that." Yes, Cardinal Sin, I found it. I didn't read it, so thank you for pointing that out. Alexander Wilson is here. Alexander Wilson is a long-term contributor, both to the channel and to the Post-Geek Singularity. He is an imagination connoisseur par excellence. Alexander Wilson says, Boys to Men's intro at their Vegas residence was a combination of their greatest hits and the song Duel of the Fates. Wow. It was epic. I never knew I'll Make Love to You would go so well with Star Wars. I didn't know that. That's true. That's hilarious. That is hilarious, Alexander Wilson. Now I want to see that. Is that online somewhere? Man, that sounds epic. I wonder if they licensed Duel of the Fates. Mark C. is here. Surprised to see Rise of Skywalker nominated for original score. Is this the Oscars giving the maestro a victory lap? Gilbert, no. No, don't bark. I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. To me, there was not a lot of new. I love the score for Rise of Skywalker, but it recycled a lot of themes, and maybe it was. I mean, I don't know. Gilbert, please, be a good boy. I don't think that, I think others, look, I think Hildur Goodman's daughter, I say Goodman's daughter because I remember that from the character from The Player, but that's not her last name. But I think she's going to win, the composer for Joker, because she, with her score for Chernobyl and the score, it's Tallulah's here too, and the score for Joker, she's had a hell of a year. I mean, really transcending what film scoring can be, really taking us into a new realm. Really, really good stuff. Good stuff there. Jay Oliveria says, R&B, love your character at the Schmodown. I watched Star Trek because of you and Jason Inman. I'm at City on the Edge of Forever. Cumberbatch's Khan was great, but the script was meh. Boy, isn't that the case? Absolutely. You're correct. I'm glad you're watching Star Trek because of me and Jason Inman. By the way, Jason Inman and Ashley V. Robinson are publishing I think they're crowdfunding right now their new version of their comic Jupiter Jet. The first volume was delightful, and if there's any two people that I love more than them, I don't know who they are, but they're very talented, and I think absolutely should you support Jason Inman and Ashley V. Robinson's Jupiter Jet. So if they're running their crowdfunding campaign, I wholeheartedly recommend that you support them. Jerome Morgan tipped $4. He said, good evening from Orlando, Florida, Viceroy. After watching the Morbius trailer and seeing some of the surprising Easter eggs and cameos, do you think it will excite fans enough to push it over the $1 billion mark? That's a good question. As many of you know, Morbius dropped today, the trailer for Morbius. I talked about this at the top of the now 2 hours and 15 minutes I've been talking. But I thought Morbius looked great. The horror element might I guess Venom has a horror element too. I mean, look, it looks terrific. I thought Morbius looked great. It really depends on how good it is going to be. I don't know. I can't necessarily speak to that. But it does look great. It does look great. And I'm very much excited about seeing it. I liked all the Easter eggs. I liked where it was going to go. It looks really serious. It looks like it has what I love, verisimilitude. And I am excited. Whether it's going to make $1 billion, I mean, look, man, I think making $1 billion is always going to be an extraordinary benchmark. It'll always be. I know people now are like, it's $1 billion, as if that's something normal. But it's not. I mean, it's extraordinary. So I would say that, wow, pretty crazy. $1 billion, I think it's a lot of money. I can't go there, but maybe, if we find out Michael Keaton, is he playing the Vulture? Like, what was that all about? What a surprise. They kept that under wraps. If Spider-Man shows up, who knows where that movie could go. I don't want to say it could make $1 billion, but it's always a possibility. Just like Spock said, and Kirk quoted him at the end of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, there are always possibilities. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to this episode number 317 of Robservations, a show about something. I would request, if you could, if you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe, and you'll know when I go on and contribute. By the way, this channel, more than anything, is about building a community of like-minded, or not even like-minded, just a community. Maybe having not like-minded people, you're still welcome. But this is all about the fan community that we're building. You imagination connoisseurs, you're all imagination connoisseurs, and the Post-Geek Singularity community that we are building here. I think it's unique, and one of the great places to go is the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook group. You can go there where the Richard posts lots of things, or you can go to the Burnettwork.net website where you can send me videos, and I encourage people to send me videos of where you live, where you go see movies, do you have comic book stores, or just say hello to everybody else. It's great to put names and faces together, and that is tremendous. All of the letters I read on the show are there. You can go comment. You can also add your 3-word movie reviews, not just to the movies that are already there, but you can also, there's a lot that aren't, most of the movies aren't, as a matter of fact, you can add your 3-word movie reviews. If you want to share your action figure collection, your omnibus collection, your artwork, your tattoos, your significant others, whatever the hell you want to share with the community, please, I encourage you to upload it to the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on the website, and that is theburnettwork.net. You can see it right down below. So that's great. And who knows what I'll be talking about tomorrow. You just never know. Working in this business, finding out crazy things happening every single day. This was an interesting chat. And by the way, no, I do not have, let me just say it again, I do not have the script. I am not going to give it out to anybody. And if it shows up on Reddit or anything like that, I had nothing to do with it. I told you it was Mission Impossible. It's not in my possession. I don't touch it. I don't have access to it. I don't even want access to it. I just told you what I think based on notes. So there you go. And that brings me to my great moderating staff. I want to say thank you to Mike Bodden, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa. Of course, the former detective, Jim Boyers, and of course, the great Greg Smith, and our newest moderators, Jordy Lyons and Lewis Yu. I want to thank them for all the work they do and for making this community the inviting place that it is. So always thank your moderators. That's what I say. I think that's important. And I'm going to now bring an end to Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 317. Thank you all for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day.